Hey guys, Mitko here from DN Models. Today I will give you another video about the Su-25, the main figure in the war in Ukraine in 2022. Interestingly, on both sides of the front. What I will talk about are the cockpit, the engines, and the ceiling of the plane. The engines of the Su-25 are two types, R95 and R195. In general, they have similar features. The R95 is basically R13-300 without afterburner, latter one being used on MiG-21 MF and Su-15. It is a twin-spool turbojet engine with proven reliability. There is a 3-stage low-pressure compressor and 5-stage high-pressure compressor. The low pressure does not feature guide vanes. That, alongside with the non-variable oval intakes and the non-variable nozzles, add to the limited ceiling of the aircraft as well as the relatively narrow speed range. Engines are mounted on the both sides of the fuselage in separate nacelles, to which the wings are attached. In between them is the rear fuel tank of the aircraft. That, and especially wing attachment, is a very interesting approach on behalf of Sukhoi Design Bureau and might be discussed in another video. The engines are placed in the end of the nacelle in very adequate position considering the purpose of the plane. Their gearboxes remain about the line of the trailing edge of the wing, low inside the nacelle and behind the main landing gear. That position is surprisingly very adequate, and even though it doesn't seem like it, it is protective of the gearbox itself. It is one of the reasons for the famous Su-25 survivability. Both R95 and 195 can be started on the ground with the help of autonomous electrical system, as well as with the help of a ground power unit, or GPU. R95 is mounted on the export versions, also known as Su-25K and Su-25UBK. R195 is mounted on the Russian versions, being considered part of the upgrade package. They are different in few key points. R95 gives 40.2 kilonewtons, while R195 gives more, 42.1, and additionally there is an emergency power, also known as Chereзвычайный regime, for extreme situations where the Russians squeezed 44.1 kilonewtons of thrust. The latter one usually leads to premature overhaul of the engine though. Adding to that, R195 is more thirsty for fuel. Not by much, but about 5%, probably due to some increased temperature limits. The R195 is advertised as producing 12% more power than the R95 ESH. How much of that info is accurate though is unclear. There is a dual fire detection system mounted in each nacelle and respectively a fire extinguishing system complemented by drain system to remove all the oils and the fuel from the non-working engine in case of unsuccessful start. Engines, as well as the gearboxes, are cooled by the relative wind entering the engine. That is a simplistic decision, but very effective nonetheless. There are several cooling scoops, most visible on the upper side of the aircraft in front of the vertical stabilizer, and on some variants in the root of the step itself. There is a fuel accumulator system providing 15 seconds of fuel feed in 0 or negative G conditions. Since the Su-25 is not designed to fly inverted, except in very few conditions, this seems to be more than enough. There is also an engine bleed system used for the air conditioning of the cockpit, quite similar to theoretical design of the bootstrap system of a passenger jet. The gearbox takes care of the hydraulic pressure, alternator, starter generators, fuel pressure, and fuel pump regulation. By itself, the gearbox seems like it is exposed to the external damage, but it is at such a place that it remains somehow in the shade of most of the events. The engine oil system is an autonomous one, closed type, taking care of the protection of the rubbing parts and, of course, wear and tear of the materials, pretty much like any other oil system with nothing overly special embedded. The TBO, or time between overhaul, is 500 hours, which to many of you probably seems very little, but that is, in general, the Soviet concept of making aircraft engines. Cheap and easy to be thrown away in exchange for new ones when time comes. In general, Su-25 can fly on one engine, although the asymmetrical thrust requires some decent amount of work from the pilot's end. However, as you can see on the numerous pictures around the web, Su-25 seems to be indestructible. Since the 80s and its participation in Afghanistan, plenty returned home with nacelles damaged badly, parts of the stabs missing, and damages that every other regular plane will not survive. The engines are not smokeless. That is considered important, but not in the case of Su-25. Its work altitude is mostly around 500 feet and below, where, with or without smoke, it is hard to spot the plane when it's coming. Engine-wise, the plane is built around two things: safety and redundancy, both of those interchangeable as requirements, complementing each other, and as you can see, resulting in pretty sturdy machine. Compared to the turbofan engines of the A-10 Warthog, Su-25 engines are obsolete. Nevertheless, still the plane is very tough. Despite the short engine life of 500 hours or less, relative inefficiency disclosed by the smoky performance and crippled aerodynamics of the intakes and the nozzles, still Su-25 managed to survive almost any war so far. That leaves fourth-generation fighter and attack planes of the Russian Federation in the dust. As I've said in my previous video, Ukrainians are lucky to have it in their Air Force because, obviously, this is the plane that will survive the war after everything else is destroyed. The cockpit of the Su-25 is very well protected and quite spacious. Unlike Mikoyan's aircraft, Sukhoi actually thought about the pilot's ergonomics, and everything inside is pretty comfortably arranged. Altogether, after the mid-70s, Sukhoi planes are famous for being quite easy on the pilots, unlike anything else that Soviets have made. The front panel of the Su-25 is obsolete though. It features primitive head-up display, steam gauge dials, and the typical milkish green color appearance, which eventually Soviets believed is easier on the eyes of the pilot. The cockpit lighting is not very sophisticated, and nighttime flying is a challenge on the pilot more than anything else. If you have 4 hands and 3 more pair of eyes, you'll be fine though, because that cockpit requires a lot from the pilot. On the improved Su-25s, the situation is slightly different. The Russian SM upgrade feature one large vertically placed display for situational information, as well as slightly rearranged steam gauges. But its most advanced feature is the improved head-up display, which provides the pilot with information somewhat superior than what you get on the midlife upgrades of the flanker family, which is quite better than the Su-25 initial series. Here is a good place to add 2 other options. Israelis did a concept for an upgraded cockpit for Georgia quite a while ago. That was called Scorpion and featured full glass cockpit. However, that never saw the light of day in mass-produced planes. Belarus, on the other hand, modified 8 Bulgarian Su-25s, and there the panel is full glass with improved head-up display as well as highly elevated weapons capabilities. Such planes are not used in the war in Ukraine, but still they do exist. And to be perfectly honest with you, I have very abundant information of that cockpit. But since I got it directly from the people of the factory, I'm not allowed to share that. I can assure you though, it is nothing short of a modern at first glance. How well it works, I don't know, but it seems to be pretty decent. The pilot of the Su-25 is sitting in an armored tub in an ejection seat, and the cockpit is unpressurized, which is one of the main issues with the Su-25 if you ask me. It left the ceiling of the plane in the low 20,000s in feet, which eliminates longer range missions. Aerodynamically, the plane, with its straight wing and unrefined engine intakes, is crippled in terms of altitude. Either Soviet designers didn't care about its long range, or they just never managed to pull that complexity off at the price tag of the Frogfoot. Whatever the case is, a flight in low-high profile is practically non-existent with this plane, since the high isn't exactly high with this jet. There is a controversy on that matter. If you remember Malaysia 777 shot down over Ukraine almost a decade ago, the claims were that a Frogfoot was following it. They first said that the Su-25 shot it down, then that the rebels shot at the Su-25 but hit the Boeing, whatever. However, Babak, which is the chief designer of the plane, said that the Su-25 was not capable of reaching the flight level of the passenger jet due to the reasons stated above in the video, which makes the shooting down from the Su-25 impossible. In other interviews, though, people of his team claim that the plane can easily reach flight level 310. First option of the two is more adequate if you ask me, considering the Mach limit of the Su-25, because at higher altitude than the described flight level 230 in the specs, the Su will most likely hit the coffin corner. Whichever of the two statements is true, we cannot know, because Russians, more often than not, exaggerate their weapons capabilities because they know that advertisement is everything. Too bad that many people actually believe them. With that said, Su-25 is truly a survivor. Even though less sophisticated as a flying machine, even compared with the Mi-24 helicopter, the Su-25 survived so far any major conflict for the last 4 decades. Now, in the news, on Twitter or on Facebook, all we see left flying over Ukraine's hottest spots are Frogfoots. There are no more flankers, fullbacks, nothing. Just the ugly-looking plane that seems invulnerable to any attempt on his existence. It might be old, slow, cheap and rugged, but isn't that the point of any weapon? Weapons, after all, are to be used, abused, and then thrown away in the end. I think that Su-25 fits that description perfectly. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.